When Sergeant Douglas Henderson accidentally discovered Earth's secret space armada hidden on the dark side of the moon, his first thought was that he was a dead man. The Earth Unified Military Command would never let this breach of their most classified secret see the light of day. But instead of a black bag over his head and a disintegration beam to the skull, Douglas found himself shaking hands with stoic-faced generals. The EUMC needed a man with his skills, an elite special operations soldier who could infiltrate any facility, hack any system, and hold his own against humanity's most dangerous enemies. For the first time in his military career, Douglas was told the full truth about Earth's predicament. The Ventaxian Empire was coming, and they wouldn't stop until humanity was broken and enslaved, just like all the other poor bastards who dared to stand against their brutal regime. The Ventaxians were vicious, they were advanced, and their hunger for conquest knew no bounds. All the unified Earth government could do was prepare in secret, building doomsday weapons and a war fleet that just might give them a fighting chance when the invasion finally came. Even that secret buildup wouldn't be enough, the stone-faced generals told Douglas. They needed more intel on the Ventaxians' plans, and they needed it yesterday. That's where he came in. One man, one impossible mission, and the fate of the whole damn human race riding on his shoulders. If he got caught, he'd be executed on a live vidcast to the entire Ventaxian Empire. The same would probably happen to him back on Earth if he failed. But if he succeeded, if he could infiltrate the most secure Ventaxian command center and steal their invasion plans, humanity just might have a shot. Douglas cracked his knuckles and gave the generals a smirk. Well then, sirs, guess it's time for this human to show those alien bastards what he can do. Douglas gritted his teeth as his stealth ship swerved and dodged through the star system, Ventaxian attack craft hot on his heels. The enemy's relentless barrage hammered his ship's shields, warnings flashing across the cockpit. Commander Altair's flagship loomed ahead, its weapons locked onto Douglas. The human pilot juked and jinked, desperately trying to evade, but Altair matched him, move for move. Damn it, this guy's good, Douglas muttered, sweat beading on his brow. Another blast rocked his ship, alarms blaring, shields critical, hull breaches across multiple decks, options gone. Douglas made his choice. He aimed his crippled ship at Altair's flagship and punched the throttle. The Ventaxians opened fire, but Douglas held course. At the last second, he slammed the eject button and shot free in an escape pod. His ship plowed into the flagship's heart. A sun-bright explosion bloomed, consuming the Ventaxian vessel. Chaos reigned as Douglas's pod tumbled away in the blast wave. Alone in the silent pod, Douglas activated the hidden beacon, praying the Earth fleet would find him. Then he slumped back, exhausted, as his pod drifted through the void. Hours blurred by in the cramped pod before a shudder ran through the hull. Metal scraped metal, a hiss of atmosphere. The hatch cracked open, and Douglas found himself staring up at a face he never expected to see out here. Captain Riker? He blinked in disbelief at his old mentor. Welcome aboard the ESS Nighthawk, Riker said with a tight smile. Looks like you've had one hell of a rough ride. As Douglas stumbled out of the pod into the Nighthawk's hangar, he gaped at the sleek stealth frigate around him. Sir, what is all this? I never knew we had these kinds of ships. Riker clasped his shoulder. Son, you've just scratched the surface. Come with me to the bridge. It's time you learned the full scope of Earth's secret war preparations. On the bridge, Riker showed Douglas hollow displays of a staggering Earth armada, dreadnoughts, carriers, and stealth ships amassed in hidden bases across the solar system. Cutting-edge weapons that Douglas had only dreamed of. My God, Douglas breathed. All this and the public has no idea? Not even most of our own military? Riker nodded grimly. Total secrecy was the only way. If the Ventaxians knew. He trailed off as Douglas's face paled. What is it? Sir, the Ventaxians do know, or at least they will soon. Douglas quickly detailed his disastrous mission and the intelligence leak. Riker slammed a fist into his palm. Then we're out of time. We have to get the fleet mobilized now, or we'll be caught with our pants down when the Ventaxians come knocking. As Riker barked orders to set course for the fleet's rally point and sent warning messages to the scattered Earth forces, the Nighthawk's long-range sensors lit up with contacts. Douglas stared at the screens, his blood running cold. Ventaxian ships, hundreds of them, jumping into Earth space in a massive coordinated assault, far earlier than the humans had expected. The Nighthawk's alarms blared as the bridge crew scrambled to battle stations. Riker shot Douglas a look filled with steel and fire. "Looks like that fight is coming to us, son. You ready to show these alien bastards what humanity is made of?" Douglas straightened, meeting his former mentor's eyes. The fate of the human race hung in the balance. Time to see if all those secret preparations would be enough. He cracked his knuckles and managed a fierce grin. "Born ready, sir. Let's give 'em hell." The Nighthawk's sensors lit up with hundreds of new contacts. The Ventaxian invasion fleet had arrived. "All hands, battle stations!" Captain Riker barked. "Prepare for combat." Douglas gripped his seat as the stealth frigate accelerated to join Earth's hidden armada. Through the view screen, he watched in awe as humanity's secret fleet materialized from concealed positions across the solar system. Massive dreadnoughts, sleek carriers, and swarms of fighters converged to meet the Ventaxian threat. The two fleets clashed in a furious exchange of weapons fire. Energy beams lanced across space. Missiles streaked between ships, leaving trails of fire in their wake. Douglas's stomach lurched as the Nighthawk juked and rolled to avoid enemy fire. "Sir, their numbers are overwhelming," the tactical officer shouted. Riker's heart made. "We knew this day would come. Activate the Sunburst Protocol." A series of brilliant flashes erupted throughout the human fleet. Dozens of Earth ships suddenly changed configuration, panels sliding away to reveal hidden weapon emplacements. The Ventaxians faltered, caught off guard by the sudden increase in firepower. "Now's our chance," Riker said. "Sergeant Henderson, you're up." Douglas nodded grimly and headed for the launch bay. His team was already assembled, checking their equipment one last time. "Lock and load, people," Douglas ordered. "We're going hunting." Their assault shuttle rocketed from the Nighthawk's bay, weaving through the chaos of battle. Douglas's hands flew over the controls, dodging debris and weapons fire as they closed in on the Ventaxian flagship. With a bone-jarring impact, they slammed into the alien vessel's hull. Cutting torches flared to life, carving an entrance. The instant the breach was wide enough, Douglas and his team poured through. They encountered resistance immediately. Ventaxian warriors charged down the corridor, plasma weapons blazing. Douglas dove for cover, returning fire. The air filled with sizzling energy bolts and the screams of the wounded. "Push forward!" Douglas shouted. "We need to reach the bridge!" They fought their way through the ship, leaving a trail of Ventaxian bodies in their wake. Finally, they reached the command center. The doors hissed open, revealing Commander Altair. The alien leader's eyes narrowed. "So, the mammals have teeth after all." Douglas raised his weapon. "It's over, Altair. Surrender now." Altair laughed and lunged forward with inhuman speed. Douglas barely managed to dodge the alien's clawed hand. His team opened fire, but Altair moved like liquid, evading their shots. In seconds, the Ventaxian closed the distance. Douglas found himself locked in brutal hand-to-hand combat. Altair was inhumanly strong, but Douglas's special forces training kept him alive. They traded blows, neither gaining the upper hand. Douglas's muscles screamed with exertion. He could taste blood in his mouth. With a desperate surge of strength, he managed to slam Altair against a control panel. The alien commander coughed, blue blood trickling from his mouth. "You've lost, human. This invasion is only the beginning." Douglas's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Altair's mandibles twitched in a grotesque smile. "We have a weapon that will ensure Earth's doom. You've already lost." With a final gurgle, the alien went limp. Douglas staggered back, his palms sweating. He had to find out more. Pushing aside his exhaustion, Douglas accessed the ship's computer systems. His eyes widened as he decrypted the data. Coordinates for a secret Ventaxian base, and hints of a superweapon that could annihilate Earth. He quickly relayed the information to Captain Riker. The response came swiftly. "Good work, Sergeant." Riker's voice crackled over the comm. "But this changes everything. We're mounting an assault on that base. I'll lead the strike team myself." "Count me in, sir," Douglas replied without hesitation. As they prepared for the crucial mission, alarms blared throughout the human fleet. Douglas watched in horror as swarms of AI-controlled Ventaxian drones tore through Earth's defenses. "This is our last shot," Riker growled. "If we fail now, humanity falls. Let's move out." Their strike team blasted off toward the secret Ventaxian base, leaving the chaos of battle behind. The fate of Earth now rested in their hands. Douglas Henderson's battered body slammed into the deck of the rescue shuttle as it rocketed away from the exploding Ventaxian base. His vision swam, pain lancing through every nerve. But clutched in his white-knuckled grip was the data drive, their one hope of understanding the Ventaxian threat. "Stay with me, soldier," a medic barked, injecting him with stims. Douglas fought to focus as they docked with the Earth flagship. He stumbled onto the bridge, leaving a trail of blood. "Sir," he croaked, holding out the drive to Admiral Chen. "The intel, but sir, it's bad, real bad." Chen's face darkened as he reviewed the data. Outside the view screen, Earth ships limped back into formation, many trailing debris and venting atmosphere. Swarms of Ventaxian drones picked off stragglers. "Full retreat," Chen ordered. "Back to Luna Base. We need to regroup." Days later, Douglas stood before the Joint Chiefs in a fortified war room deep beneath the lunar surface. His wounds still ached, but dedication burned in his eyes. "The convergence," he explained. "Some kind of superweapon, but we need more data to understand what we're up against." A young scientist with unruly hair stepped forward. "Nicholas Parker, sir. I've been analyzing the Ventaxian tech. If we could access their primary data core..." "You'd need to board one of their capital ships," an admiral scoffed. "Suicide." "I'll do it," Douglas said without hesitation. Nicholas grinned. "I'm coming too. You'll need my expertise." Hours later, they crouched in a stolen Ventaxian shuttle, weaving through debris fields towards a damaged enemy destroyer. "Sure you're up for this, egghead?" Douglas asked. Nicholas patted his sidearm. "I can handle myself. Just get me to that data core." They slipped past the destroyer's compromised shields and docked. The instant the airlock cycled, plasma bolts sizzled past them. Douglas shoved Nicholas behind cover, returning fire. They fought their way through twisting corridors, Douglas's enhanced reflexes and Nicholas's surprising aim dropping Ventaxian after Ventaxian. Finally, they reached the heart of the ship. "Cover me," Nicholas said, fingers flying over alien consoles. Douglas stood guard, blasting away security drones. An alarm blared. "Got it!" Nicholas yelled. "Let's move!" They sprinted back to their shuttle, Ventaxian reinforcements hot on their heels. As they blasted free, human ships opened fire on the crippled destroyer. Back at Luna Base, Nicholas pored over the stolen data. His face went pale. "Oh God," he whispered. "The convergence. It's worse than we imagined." He explained the galaxy-spanning weapon, the cosmic destruction it would unleash. Douglas felt the weight of humanity's fate settle on his shoulders. "We have to hit them first," he growled. "Hard and fast." The planning room buzzed with grim activity. Douglas studied holo maps of Ventaxian-controlled systems. "Here," he said, pointing to a heavily fortified world. "This is where we start." Nicholas nodded. "I'm coming with you. I can identify structural weaknesses." They dropped from high orbit, plasma fire streaking past their assault pods. Douglas's hand-picked team hit the ground running, carving through Ventaxian defenses. The convergence site loomed before them, a twisted spire of impossible geometry. As they planted charges, a familiar voice rang out. "Henderson!" Douglas spun to see the mangled form of Commander Altair, more machine now than alien. "Your pathetic species is doomed," Altair sneered. "The convergence cannot be stopped." They clashed in furious combat. Douglas's enhanced strength met Altair's cybernetic fury. They traded bone-crushing blows until Douglas finally gained the upper hand, smashing Altair into a control panel. "Now," Douglas roared. Nicholas triggered the charges. As the site erupted in flame, they sprinted for the extraction point. One convergence site destroyed. But the war was a long way to go. The dropship shuddered as another volley of Ventaxian plasma fire grazed its hull. Douglas gripped the controls, his fist clenched with effort as he wrenched the craft into a series of evasive maneuvers. "Shields at 12%, Nicholas shouted from the engineering station. "We can't take much more of this." Douglas grit his teeth. "Prepare for lightspeed jump. It's our only shot." As Nicholas input the coordinates, a deafening explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared as acrid smoke filled the cockpit. "Direct hit to the engines," a crewman coughed. "We're losing power." Douglas slammed the hyperdrive lever forward. The stars stretched into streaks of light, then snapped back as the jump failed. The ship tumbled end over end, systems flickering. "What happened?" Douglas barked. Nicholas frantically scanned his displays. "Ventaxian interference scrambled our nav computer. We're way off course." As the ship stabilized, Douglas's heart sank. Instead of friendly territory, they drifted in an unfamiliar system. Debris from ancient battles surrounded them. "Activate emergency cloaking," Douglas ordered, "and get me a damage report." The news was grim. Life support was failing, and their air supply dwindled by the minute. Douglas watched the oxygen readout tick down, each breath bringing them closer to suffocation. "This is it then," Nicholas said quietly. "We're going to die out here." Douglas opened his mouth to reply when a proximity alert chirped. He leaned forward, squinting at the sensor display. "What the hell is that?" he muttered. Drifting among the debris was a massive ship, unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its hull gleamed with an otherworldly sheen, covered in intricate patterns that defied description. "It's not Ventaxian," Nicholas breathed. "The energy readings are off the charts. This tech is beyond anything we've encountered." Douglas made a snap decision. "Prep for EVA, we're going aboard." They battled their way through the debris field, dodging jagged chunks of wreckage. As they approached the derelict vessel, its immense scale became apparent. It dwarfed even the largest Ventaxian capital ships. They found an airlock and cut their way inside. Douglas led the team through twisting corridors that seemed to defy Euclidean geometry. The air was stale, but breathable. In what appeared to be the ship's control center, they encountered their first resistance. Alien defense drones swarmed them, forcing the team to fight for every inch. Douglas's rifle spat superheated plasma, melting through the constructs. Finally, they secured the bridge. Nicholas immediately set to work on the alien consoles. "This is incredible," he muttered. "The database, it's like nothing I've ever seen." As Nicholas worked, holographic displays flickered to life around them. Douglas watched in awe as the story of an ancient, hyper-advanced civilization unfolded before his eyes. "My God," Douglas whispered, "they seeded life throughout the galaxy, including Earth." Nicholas nodded grimly. "But look at this. They were running from something called the convergence." The holograms showed scenes of devastation as an implacable force consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing in its wake. Douglas felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the true nature of what they faced. "The Ventaxians," he said. "They must have found some of this tech and reverse engineered it, but they don't understand what they're dealing with." A proximity alert blared. On the sensors, they saw Ventaxian ships closing in on their position. Douglas's mind raced. He had to warn Earth about the true nature of the convergence. But how? "The comms array," he said suddenly. "Nicholas, can you tap into it?" The scientist's fingers flew across the alien controls. "I think so, but we'll need to bring more systems online to boost the signal strength." Douglas nodded. "Do it. I'll start working on the defensive systems." As they raced against time to bring the ancient ship back to life, Douglas felt the weight of all existence bearing down on him. The fate of not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy hung in the balance. He allowed himself a grim smile. One way or another, this would be humanity's finest hour. The encrypted transmission burst through the static, striking the Earth fleet's communications array like a bolt of lightning. Admiral Chen's eyes widened as he decrypted Douglas Henderson's message, revealing the true horror of the convergence. "All ships, hold the line," Chen barked into the fleet-wide channel. "Reinforcements are incoming." But the Ventaxian onslaught was relentless. Human ships exploded into silent fireballs, their crews vaporized in an instant. Chen watched helplessly as his fleet dwindled, knowing they couldn't last much longer. Suddenly, space itself seemed to tear open. A task force of Earth's most advanced warships emerged from the rift, led by the newly promoted Captain Nicholas Parker. "Sorry, we're late to the party," Parker's voice crackled over the comms. "Let's go get our people back." Parker's ships unleashed a devastating barrage, carving a path through the Ventaxian forces. They pushed toward the alien derelict, where Douglas and his team fought wave after wave of Ventaxian boarders. Inside the ancient vessel, Douglas fired his plasma rifle, the superheated bolts searing through Ventaxian battle armor. "Hold the line," he shouted to his dwindling squad. "Help is coming." The ship rocked as Parker's task force engaged, their weaponry pummeling the Ventaxian boarding craft. A marine dropship blasted its way through the carnage, docking with the derelict. "Henderson!" Parker's voice rang out as he led a squad of heavily armed Marines onto the alien bridge. "Time to go!" They fought their way back to the Earthships, the Marines laying down suppressing fire as Douglas and his team sprinted across the gap between vessels. Just as victory seemed within reach, a piercing whine filled the air. Commander Altair's flagship loomed above them, powering up a massive cannon that crackled with otherworldly energy. The beam lanced out, slicing through the human fleet's shields like they weren't even there. "Shields down!" Parker shouted as alarms blared throughout his ship. "We're sitting ducks!" Douglas's mind raced. He sprinted back to the alien derelict's control center, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar console. The ship groaned in protest as he pushed its systems to the limit. A shimmering energy field sprang to life around the human fleet, deflecting the next volley from Altair's weapon. But Douglas could see the strain on the ancient systems. They wouldn't last long. "Parker," he shouted into his comm, "we need to get out of here now. I'm going to try something insane." "Do it!" Parker replied without hesitation. Douglas accessed the derelict's experimental warp drive, a technology far beyond human understanding. Warning messages flashed across the alien screens, but he ignored them all. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, slamming his hand down on what he hoped was the activation sequence. Reality itself seemed to bend and twist around them. A vortex of swirling energy engulfed the fleet, stretching and compressing space-time. Douglas felt his insides lurch as they were catapulted across vast distances in the blink of an eye. When the chaos subsided, they found themselves drifting in an unknown region of space, far from the battle they'd just fled. But their reprieve was short-lived. The ancient derelict shuddered violently, internal explosions rocking its vast structure. Douglas watched in horror as containment fields began to fail throughout the ship. "We need to evacuate!" he shouted to Parker. "This thing's about to blow!" They raced against time, shuttles ferrying the last of the crew off the dying vessel. Douglas remained behind, frantically downloading every scrap of data he could from the alien computers. As the last shuttle prepared to depart, Douglas made a final transmission, sending the precious data to the Earth fleet's computers. He leapt aboard just as the deck began to disintegrate beneath his feet. From the safety of Parker's ship, they watched the ancient derelict implode in a brilliant flash of light, taking its secrets with it to oblivion. In the aftermath, Douglas surveyed the battered remnants of humanity's forces. Ships limped along on auxiliary power, their hulls scarred and blackened. The crew's faces were gaunt, haunted by the losses they'd endured. But as Parker's scientists began to analyze the stolen alien data, a spark of hope ignited in Douglas's chest. They'd paid a terrible price, but now they had a chance, however slim, to stop the convergence and save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Douglas clenched his fists, his voice barely above a whisper. Whatever it takes, we're going to end this. The Ventaxians have no idea what they've unleashed. Parker nodded grimly, his eyes fixed on the unfamiliar stars outside the view screen. Then let's get to work. We've got a galaxy to save. The battered human fleet drifted through the void, a ragtag collection of ships barely holding together. In the cramped lab aboard Parker's flagship, scientists hunched over terminals, their eyes bloodshot from weeks of relentless work. Douglas paced the narrow corridor outside, his boots echoing on the metal grating. The waiting was excruciating. Every day brought them closer to total systems failure, their resources dwindling with each passing hour. A shout from inside the lab sent Douglas rushing through the door. Parker stood at a central console, his face illuminated by a holographic display filled with alien script. "We've cracked it," Parker said, his voice hoarse. "The convergence, it's not what we thought." Douglas leaned in, studying the swirling data. "What am I looking at?" Parker's fingers flew across the controls, bringing up a simulation of the universe's birth. It's been here since the beginning, an entropic force born from the Big Bang itself. The simulation showed a voracious darkness consuming entire galaxies, reducing them to nothingness. Douglas felt a chill run down his spine as he watched eons pass in seconds. "My God," he whispered, "it's unstoppable." Parker shook his head. "Not quite, look at this." The display shifted, showing the familiar outline of the derelict ship they'd encountered. The aliens who built this, they'd transcended physical form. They were trying to seed consciousness throughout the galaxy as a defense against the convergence. Douglas's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "And the Ventaxians found this tech and corrupted it," Parker finished. "But that's not the worst of it." With a few keystrokes, he brought up schematics of the Ventaxian construction sites. Douglas saw them now for what they truly were, massive gateways channeling the convergence's entropic energy. "If they finish this network," Parker said, his voice barely above a whisper, "it'll trigger a chain reaction. The entire universe, gone." The weight of this knowledge settled on Douglas like a physical force. He gripped the edge of the console, steadying himself. "We have to stop them," he said, "whatever it takes." Parker nodded, bringing up a new display. "We've located a nexus point. It's heavily defended, but if we can take it out..." Douglas studied the tactical overlay, his mind already formulating a plan. "Gather the fleet. We're going in." Days later, their battered ships dropped out of FTL on the edge of an unfamiliar system. At its heart, a massive construct orbited a dead star, pulsing with malevolent energy. Alarms blared as Ventaxian ships swarmed towards them. Douglas barked orders, coordinating their desperate assault. Plasma fire crisscrossed the void as the two fleets clashed. In the chaos, Douglas led a team of Marines to a waiting dropship. They rocketed towards the surface of the Nexus, weaving through debris and enemy fire. The landing was rough, the dropship's hull screeching as it skidded across the alien metal. Douglas was first out, his rifle up and scanning for threats. "Move!" he shouted, leading his team deeper into the structure. They fought their way through twisting corridors, the air thick with ozone and the screams of dying Ventaxians. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the Nexus. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. At its center, a singularity pulsed within a web of energy fields. Douglas's team fanned out, securing the room as he approached a control terminal. "Start the hack," he ordered. "We need to overload this thing." As his Marines worked, a familiar voice rang out. "Henderson!" Douglas spun to see Commander Altair, encased in a massive battlesuit. The Ventaxian's eyes blazed with hatred. "You have no idea what you're doing," Altair snarled. "The convergence is our salvation." Douglas raised his rifle. "It's the end of everything, you fool." They clashed, the chamber shaking from the force of their battle. Douglas's enhanced reflexes were barely a match for Altair's augmented strength. Around them, the singularity began to destabilize. Energy arced across the room as containment fields buckled. "It's done," one of the Marines shouted. "We need to go!" Douglas disengaged, sprinting for the exit. He glanced back to see Altair consumed by tendrils of impossible darkness. They barely made it back to their craft, launching into space as the Nexus tore itself apart behind them. Douglas slumped in his seat, exhaustion washing over him. The victory was short-lived. As they limped away from the destruction, a transmission from Parker cut through the static. "Heavy losses," Parker's voice crackled. "Fleet destroyed. On course for Triangulum. Supplies critical." Douglas closed his eyes, processing the magnitude of their situation. They'd struck a blow against the Convergence, but at what cost? As their craft hurtled towards an unknown future, he looked at the faces of his surviving crew. Tired, afraid, but unbeaten. They'd crossed galaxies and faced cosmic horrors. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The alien world loomed before them, a blue-green jewel in the darkness of Triangulum. As they began their descent, Douglas knew their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The alien world's atmosphere burned red as the battered human fleet breached its upper layers. Alarms blared throughout the ships, warning of critical fuel levels and failing systems. "Brace for impact!" Douglas shouted over the comm as their vessel shuddered violently. The ground rushed up to meet them, a sea of alien foliage stretching as far as the eye could see. With a deafening screech of twisting metal, the ship plowed into the forest. Trees snapped like twigs under its bulk, leaving a kilometers-long gash of destruction in its wake. When the craft finally ground to a halt, an eerie silence fell. Douglas pulled himself from the wreckage, muscles screaming in protest. All around him, dazed survivors stumbled from the crash site. The air was thick and humid, filled with unfamiliar scents. "Status report," he barked, helping a limping crew member to his feet. Parker emerged from the ship's remains, his face streaked with grime and blood. "We're down to 312 souls," he said, his voice hoarse. "Maybe half our supplies made it through the crash." Douglas surveyed the alien landscape, his gut clenching at the sight of strange, towering structures in the distance. Biometallic spires jutted into the sky, their purpose unknown. "Set up a perimeter," Douglas ordered, "and get me a full inventory of what we've got left." As the shell-shocked refugees established a makeshift camp, Douglas pored over the long-range scan data. The readings were unlike anything he'd ever seen, energy signatures that defied conventional physics. "Sir!" a young technician called out, her eyes wide. "You need to see this!" On her screen, a grainy image showed what looked like a city, if cities were grown rather than built. Organic and mechanical elements intertwined in impossible ways. "We're not alone here," Douglas muttered. Days passed as they fortified their position. Douglas led a small recon team deeper into the wilderness, pushing through dense underbrush and avoiding carnivorous flora that snapped at their heels. They crested a hill and froze. Before them lay the crumbling remains of what could only be a Ventaxian outpost. Alien vegetation had reclaimed most of the structure, but its angular design was unmistakable. "How is this possible?" whispered one of the Marines. Douglas approached a half-buried console, its screen flickering weakly. He brushed away layers of growth, revealing Ventaxian script. As the data scrolled past, his blood ran cold. "This outpost, it's centuries old," he said, disbelief evident in his voice. "They've known about this galaxy for far longer than we ever suspected." Before they could process this revelation, their comms crackled to life. "Henderson!" Parker's voice was urgent. "We've got incoming!" Douglas and his team raced back to the camp. They arrived to find the refugees huddled behind makeshift barricades, weapons trained on the surrounding forest. Strange, mechanical sounds echoed through the trees. Suddenly the foliage parted. Towering figures emerged, biomechanical beings that moved with uncanny grace. Their single, glowing eyes swept over the human defenses. "Hold your fire!" Douglas shouted, knowing they were hopelessly outmatched. He stepped forward, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The largest of the aliens, easily 3 meters tall, approached. "We come seeking refuge," Douglas said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Our world was destroyed by a force known as the Convergence, unleashed by a race called the Ventaxians. The Cycloptic being tilted its head, processing Douglas's words. When it spoke, the sound seemed to bypass his ears entirely, resonating directly in his mind. "We know of the Convergence," it intoned, "and of your flight from its destruction. Your arrival was anticipated." Douglas blinked in surprise. "You knew we were coming?" The alien's eye pulsed with an inner light. "The echoes of creation span galaxies, human. We have long awaited this cycle of upheaval." As the initial shock wore off, Douglas found himself drawn into tense negotiations. The biomechanical beings, who called themselves the synths, offered aid and sanctuary, but at a price. They demanded full access to all human scientific and technological data. "We must pool our knowledge if we are to stand against the Convergence," the synth leader stated. Douglas agreed, but unease gnawed at him. The synths spoke of humanity's role in some greater cosmic drama, hinting at connections to long-dead precursor races. Their interests seemed to go beyond mere alliance. As the humans integrated into synth society, Douglas couldn't shake the feeling that they were being studied, specimens in some grand experiment. He persevered to uncover the truth, despite the toll. In the privacy of his new quarters, Douglas addressed his core team. "We play along for now," he said, his voice low. "But make no mistake, we are not pawns in anyone's game. We'll take what we need from the synths, learn their secrets, and find a way to save Earth on our own terms." The others nodded, a spark of defiance kindling in their eyes. They had crossed galaxies and faced cosmic horrors. Whatever trials lay ahead, humanity would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. Douglas stood before the sprawling bio-citadel, its organic spires pulsing with an otherworldly glow. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. The synth leader, a towering figure of metal and flesh, beckoned him forward. "Come, human, there is much to discuss." Inside, Douglas and Parker followed their alien guide through twisting corridors that seemed to breathe. They entered a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and pulsating data streams. "What you see here," the synth intoned, "is the culmination of eons of cosmic history." Douglas watched as images flickered to life. Ancient star maps, DNA helices, and impossible geometries. His eyes widened as connections began to form. "The Ventaxian," he breathed. "They're not what we thought." Parker leaned in, his face illuminated by the ethereal light. "These codes, they're talking about some kind of precursor race, the ones who seeded life across the galaxies." The synth nodded, its single eye pulsing. "Correct. The very beings who foresaw the Convergence and sought to create a defense against it." Douglas felt a chill run down his spine as the implications sank in. "And the Ventaxians are what? A corruption of that plan?" "Precisely," the synth confirmed. "But that is not all. Your own species, humanity, is also tied to this cosmic legacy." Before Douglas could process this revelation, new data streams erupted across the displays. He saw familiar star patterns, the Triangulum Galaxy. "We have detected recent Ventaxian incursions into our realm," the synth explained. "They seek remnants of the precursor technology, artifacts of immense power." Parker's face paled. "If they get their hands on that..." "They could not only halt the Convergence," Douglas finished, "but potentially weaponize it, turn it against the rest of the universe." The synth's eye flashed with what might have been approval. "You grasp the gravity of the situation quickly, human. We propose a solution, a strike against the Ventaxian facility where these artifacts are being studied." Douglas nodded, his mind already racing through tactical scenarios. "What do you need from us?" Hours later, Douglas stood before a group of his most trusted soldiers. They were clad in sleek biomechanical armor provided by the synths, a fusion of human and alien technology. "This mission is unlike anything we've faced before," Douglas addressed them. "We're going into the heart of Ventaxian territory, in a galaxy we barely understand, but the stakes couldn't be higher." He activated a holographic display, showing the layout of their target, a secret Ventaxian base hidden within a volatile ion nebula. Our objective is simple: infiltrate, gather intel, and if possible, secure any precursor artifacts we find. We launch in 10 minutes. Any questions? Silence fell over the group. Douglas saw drive in their eyes, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. Good. Fear would keep them sharp. The alien stealth craft hummed to life around them, its hull seeming to shift and ripple. As they launched into the swirling chaos of the Ion Nebula, Douglas gripped his seat. Lightning arced across the view screen, threatening to tear them apart. "Steady!" he called out. "Trust in the tech. We've got one shot at this." They emerged from the storm to find a desolate, frozen moon. At its center stood a jagged structure of black metal, the Ventaxian facility. "Approaching drop zone," the pilot announced. "Prepare for insertion." Douglas felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as they touched down. The moment the hatch opened, bitter cold assaulted them. He activated his suit's thermal systems and raised his weapon. "Move out," he ordered. "Stay low, stay quiet." They advanced across the windswept surface, dodging automated defense turrets and sensor arrays. At last, they reached a maintenance hatch. Parker worked quickly, bypassing the security protocols. "We're in," he whispered. The team moved swiftly through the facility's winding corridors. Alarms blared intermittently, but so far they'd avoided detection. As they approached the central vault, Douglas felt a strange tingling sensation. The very air seemed to vibrate with potential energy. The vault door hissed open, revealing a treasure trove of impossible technology. Towering monoliths covered in swirling glyphs stood alongside devices that hurt to look at directly. Crystal matrices pulsed with otherworldly light. "My God," Parker breathed. "It's all true." Douglas shook off his awe. "Focus. Download everything you can. We need to—" A familiar voice cut through the air. "Henderson, I should have known." Douglas spun to see Commander Altair, somehow alive and more terrifying than ever. The Ventaxian's body crackled with barely contained energy, his eyes blazing with inhuman power. "You're too late," Altair sneered. "We've already begun to harness the precursor's gifts. Observe." With a gesture, reality itself seemed to warp around them. Douglas watched in horror as one of his soldiers was twisted into an impossible shape before vanishing entirely. "Fall back!" Douglas shouted, opening fire. His team scrambled for cover as Altair unleashed hell. The battle that followed defied description. Altair wielded powers that shattered the laws of physics, while Douglas and his team fought desperately to stay alive and complete their mission. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, Douglas saw his opportunity. He sprinted towards the vault's power core, dodging reality-warping blasts. "What are you doing?" Altair roared. Douglas didn't answer. He plunged his hands into the swirling energy matrix, feeling it burn through his armor. With a primal scream, he overloaded the system. "Everyone out!" he yelled to his surviving team members. "Now!" They raced back to their ship as reality itself began to unravel around them. The last thing Douglas saw before the hatch closed was Altair's face, contorted in rage and disbelief. The alien craft rocketed away from the doomed moon, narrowly escaping the collapsing singularity that swallowed the Ventaxian base. Douglas slumped in his seat, every nerve ending screaming in agony. Did we get it?" he managed to ask. Parker nodded, holding up a data core. "Everything we could grab. It's transmitting to the synths now." Days later, Douglas lay in a regeneration pod, his body slowly knitting itself back together. Parker entered, his face a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "Douglas," he said urgently, "the synths, they've made a breakthrough. You need to see this."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.